The night was quiet, broken only by the groaning wind that swept across a yard forgotten by time. In the middle of it stood a rusted cage, its bars streaked with decay, trapping Rio the parrot inside. His feathers, once radiant, had dulled to shades of gray-green under neglect. His wings drooped with exhaustion as he pressed against the cold iron. A broken water dish lay shattered in the dirt, mocking his thirst. "Mark," his keeper muttered with indifference, "not worth the effort," before turning away, his back heavy with cruelty. Shadows stretched across the walls as if caging him further. Rio's beak opened to release a broken croak, a faint echo of songs that once filled the air. His spirit quivered but did not vanish. In his weary eyes shimmered a fragile defiance, a whisper that clung to life. The hours dragged on as the wind howled through cracks in the fence. Rio pressed into the cold corner of his cage, claws curled against rusted metal. The damp earth beneath him smelled of mold and decay. Mark had vanished indoors, leaving behind silence sharper than his words. Rio opened his beak, whispering broken chirps, faint echoes of a life once filled with laughter and sound. He tried again, but only cracked notes emerged, carried off by the wind. His wings sagged, his chest rising and falling with effort. Yet deep within, his heartbeat whispered stubbornly, "Hold on." Memories stirred within Rio, visions of bright skies and warm voices. His claws scraped across the iron, releasing a piercing metallic cry that echoed in the night. He flinched, yet forced another sound, weaker, broken, but defiant. The moon painted him in silver light, feathers ragged yet glimmering faintly. He shook, body frail, but his spirit pulsed with the memory of freedom. Each scrape was more than noise. It was a plea, a reminder that his voice still lived, though buried under neglect. He trembled, but he endured. The wind rattled loose boards, carrying hollow whispers across the yard. Rio tucked his head beneath his wing, but rest would not come. Every creak of wood felt like a predator waiting. He lifted his head slowly, eyes heavy but unbroken, and turned toward the rising moon. A fragile cry left his throat, cracking under strain. It drifted into the night, unheard yet desperate, begging for recognition. Between despair and endurance, his spirit flickered, waiting for the moment it might soar again. The first signs of dawn crept into the sky, gray light brushing shadows away. Rio stirred, his chest rising more steadily. The cage was still rusted, but morning light softened its edges, painting hope over despair. The house behind stood lifeless, indifferent, but Rio's body lifted, weary eyes holding on. A faint whistle slipped from his beak, fragile but true, carried by the breeze. It was not music, but it was proof. He lived, he fought, and he waited. Somewhere beyond neglect, freedom called. The first rays of morning crept across the yard, slipping through cracks in the fence. Rio stirred, his weary eyes catching the faint light. The cold air clung to his feathers, but the warmth of dawn brushed them gently, reminding him of what freedom once felt like. He tilted his head, remembering voices that had once filled his life, echoes of laughter and care. His beak opened, releasing a weak but steady whistle, fragile yet defiant. Though caged, his heart longed for connection, for a hand that would bring kindness instead of neglect. Each sound he made was not only survival but a plea, as if asking the world, "Will anyone hear me?" As the sun climbed higher, Rio shuffled along the bars, claws scraping softly. His chest rose and fell, breaths shallow but steady. His gaze wandered past the fence, as though searching for something beyond the limits of his prison. His heart remembered warmth, the gentle touch of hands that once fed him, the sound of kind voices he had nearly forgotten. He croaked a broken call, a faint sound that drifted into the morning air. Silence answered, but the cry itself was proof of his endurance. His spirit, though wounded, refused to fade. The narrator described how Rio's feathers lifted faintly in the breeze, as if his body still remembered freedom. His eyes closed for a moment, and he imagined flying, wings stretching wide across endless sky. But when he opened them, the rusted bars greeted him again, a cruel reminder of captivity. Still, his heart clung to hope. His broken voice, fragile as it was, carried the memory of what he once had been. It was as though each note was both a prayer and a promise. Somewhere beyond, the world waited, even if he could not yet reach it. Time passed slowly, each moment stretching like an eternity. Rio pecked gently at the metal floor of his cage, his body weak yet persistent. He shifted closer to the sunlight, letting warmth brush against his feathers. His mind drifted again, searching for the familiar rhythm of kindness. Once long ago he had been loved. The memory flickered through him like a candle flame, fragile but unextinguished. He whispered another note, cracked but deliberate, as though willing the air itself to remember him. Hope was not a song yet, but it was still a sound. As noon approached, the yard grew brighter, shadows shrinking under the weight of the sun. Rio lifted himself higher on the bars, claws trembling but steady. His eyes reflected both fear and longing, searching endlessly for someone to notice. His body carried scars, but his spirit refused surrender. He pressed against the cage, beak opening once more. The note that followed was broken, faint, but real. It cut through the silence, a call to the world that he still lived, that he still hoped. In that sound, the story of his survival continued to unfold. Afternoon sun burned harshly across the yard, casting sharp shadows that cut against Rio's cage. Mark stumbled outside, muttering curses, his face twisted with irritation. He kicked the cage, sending a shudder through Rio's fragile body. Feathers scattered to the ground, drifting like lost pieces of him. Rio recoiled, eyes wide, his claws digging desperately into the bars. Mark growled, "Pathetic bird," before turning away again, leaving behind nothing but fear. The moment stretched long, cruel, heavy with despair. Rio's heart raced, yet within him still flickered a silent question. How much longer could he endure this cruelty before breaking entirely? The cage rattled from the blow, its rusted bars groaning under pressure. Rio gasped, his body trembling, but no escape came. His claws scraped the metal, as if searching for cracks in the prison that bound him. The world outside looked endless, yet he remained shackled to despair. His cries were weak, each sound carrying both pain and defiance. Mark's footsteps faded back into the house, the door slamming shut, leaving silence behind once more. Rio's breathing slowed, but his spirit still resisted. He whispered a broken call, not for Mark, but for something greater, as though begging the sky to hear. The afternoon dragged on, the sun dipping lower but still unforgiving. Rio's body ached, yet his spirit kept pushing. He shuffled along the bars, testing every gap, as if hoping one might release him. His voice cracked again, a desperate whistle carried into the wind. It was not answered, but the cry itself was proof of life. The scars of cruelty weighed heavy on him, each breath a reminder of battles endured. He trembled, but in his heart flickered an ember of resistance. If survival was pain, then he would endure pain. His song might be broken, but it was not gone. Wind swept across the yard, rattling the broken fence. Rio clung to the side of the cage, his claws tense, wings twitching faintly. He imagined flight, the feel of air carrying him higher, but reality pressed down like iron. His eyes searched beyond the fence, as though waiting for a miracle. Shadows stretched longer as daylight waned, wrapping him in a prison of both bars and time. He called again, voice thin but determined, piercing the silence. It was not loud, but it was clear. He would not surrender. Each sound was both wound and weapon, a fragile defiance against despair. As the sun sank toward the horizon, Rio's strength faltered. His body sagged, feathers drooping, but his eyes still glimmered faintly with unbroken resolve. The silence pressed heavier, the world indifferent to his suffering. Yet he lifted his head once more, releasing a whistle so soft it nearly vanished into the dusk. The note carried no strength, but it carried truth. He was alive, still enduring, still refusing to fade into nothingness. Darkness crept closer, but Rio's spirit burned stubbornly within. The cage held his body, but his voice carried beyond its bars. Darkness had fallen when footsteps echoed softly near the yard, different from the heavy ones Rio had always feared. A woman appeared at the broken fence, pausing as her eyes fell upon the rusted cage. She gasped quietly, pressing a hand to her chest. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, voice trembling with compassion. Rio tilted his head, feathers ruffling faintly as his tired eyes locked onto hers. This was no cruel figure, no shadow of pain. Her gaze shone with warmth, an emotion he barely remembered. In that fragile moment, the air shifted. For the first time in too long, Rio felt seen, as though life beyond the bars was possible. The woman crouched closer, her hand brushing gently against the cage bars. "You've been through so much," she murmured, her voice a mixture of sorrow and comfort. Rio flinched, his claws tightening, but his eyes never left hers. Slowly he leaned forward, a faint chirp escaping him, fragile yet deliberate. Her face softened, tears shimmering in her eyes as she whispered, "I'm here now." The moment was delicate, a thread of trust forming between broken spirit and gentle heart. The silence of the yard no longer felt empty, it carried the weight of connection. For Rio, hope began to breathe again. Her gaze drifted to the broken water dish and the feathers scattered across the dirt. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "No creature should suffer like this." Rio shifted closer, claws pressing gently against the bars as though answering her grief. His beak opened, releasing a faint whistle, a fragile echo of a voice once lost. The woman gasped softly, hand rising to her lips, overwhelmed by the resilience before her. "You're still fighting," she said, astonished and moved. In that instant, the revelation struck her deeply. This bird was not broken. He had endured, waiting for someone who would finally listen. From the shadow of the doorway, Mark's harsh voice sliced through the night. "Why bother with that useless bird?" His words dripped with contempt, cold and sharp. The woman's eyes narrowed, her body instinctively shifting to shield Rio from view. He shivered, claws clutching the bars, but his gaze clung to her as though she was safety itself. Mark lingered, arms crossed, face twisted with disdain. But she did not flinch. Compassion became defiance, a silent challenge against cruelty. In that charged moment, Rio felt something new: protection. His heart raced, sensing a battle between neglect and care, and for once, care stood firm. The woman rose, her silhouette framed against the cold night. Her voice was steady, clear, carrying both defiance and promise. "Because he deserves better." The words struck like lightning, slicing through the silence. Mark's sneer deepened, but her stance did not waver. Rio's heart pounded, claws gripping tighter as his eyes followed her every movement. She had spoken for him, given voice to the cry he could not utter. For the first time, his cage felt less like an ending and more like the threshold of change. Compassion had entered his prison, and with it, the possibility of freedom. The woman's voice rang with defiance as she stood before Mark, her eyes unflinching. Mark snarled, stepping closer, his tone dripping with contempt. "He's worthless, a burden." His words cut through the night, sharp as knives. Rio shuddered inside his cage, claws gripping the bars, wings trembling with fear. Yet his gaze fixed on her, the one figure who had given him hope. The tension grew, the yard charged with unspoken battle. She held her ground, shoulders squared, refusing to yield. For Rio, the moment was everything, a clash between cruelty and compassion that would decide his fate. Mark stormed forward, his boots crunching on the dirt as he shoved at the cage. The bars rattled violently, Rio flapping his wings in panic, feathers scattering into the air. The woman rushed to the cage, blocking Mark's hand with her own. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice filled with fury. Her body shielded Rio from harm as Mark glared down at her, his face twisted with rage. Rio chirped weakly, but his sound pierced the tension like a fragile plea for mercy. The night air hung heavy, trembling with the weight of confrontation. The woman's voice broke with passion as she declared, "He has suffered enough, and I won't let you hurt him again." Mark sneered, stepping back but not retreating. His silence was louder than words, the kind of silence that carried threats. Rio clung tightly to the bars, his eyes darting between them, heart pounding. The woman turned back to him, her voice softening. "You're safe with me." Her words steadied the storm, creating a fragile shield around him. Rio tilted his head, releasing a faint whistle, a sound filled with both fear and hope. It was a moment of defiance against cruelty. The conflict reached its breaking point. Mark spat angrily. "Take him then, if you think he's worth saving." His words were bitter, laced with contempt, but his retreat carried defeat. The woman moved quickly, unlocking the cage with trembling hands. Rio froze, his body torn between fear and longing. For a heartbeat, the world seemed silent, holding its breath. Then, with gentle coaxing, she whispered, "Come, Rio, you're free now." His wings quivered as he stepped cautiously forward, claws touching the open space for the first time in years. The air shifted, heavy with liberation and trembling courage. Rio stepped into the night air, the cold breeze brushing against his feathers like a forgotten memory. His wings spread shakily, his scar catching the light, but still, they opened. A faint cry escaped him, stronger than any he had made in years. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "You're free." Behind them, Mark disappeared into the shadows, defeated and silent. Rio's body trembled, but his spirit soared. For the first time in his caged life, he felt the vastness of the world around him. This was not just survival. It was the beginning of his redemption. The yard lay silent after Mark's departure, leaving only the woman and Rio bathed in the dim glow of dawn. The air felt lighter, though scars of neglect lingered in every corner. Rio perched on the edge of the open cage, wings still trembling. The woman extended her hand again, this time without fear. "It's over now," she whispered, her voice filled with tenderness. Rio hesitated, claws shifting uncertainly, before stepping onto her hand. The contact was fragile, trembling, but alive with meaning. For him, this moment was the beginning of healing, a chance to feel safety for the first time in years. The woman carried Rio gently inside, her movements steady and protective. The room smelled faintly of wood and warmth, a contrast to the cold yard. She placed him on a clean perch, setting fresh water and food beside him. Rio's eyes widened, his beak dipping into the dish with hesitation before taking a sip. His body shook faintly as he tasted water, a sensation almost forgotten. The woman smiled through tears, whispering, "You're safe here." It was a simple act, but for Rio it was freedom transformed into care. His chest rose more steadily, each breath carrying relief. Rio moved cautiously along the perch, his claws gripping the smooth wood. He tested his wings, stretching them weakly as feathers rustled. The woman watched, her eyes filled with pride and sadness, knowing his scars ran deeper than wounds. He chirped faintly, the sound echoing softly in the quiet room. For her, the sound was a promise, life returning where silence had once lived. She whispered, "You're stronger than you know." His gaze met hers, and in that moment, an unspoken bond formed. It was not just rescue, it was the beginning of trust. The day passed slowly, filled with quiet moments of recovery. Rio ate cautiously, drank deeply, and preened his feathers as if rediscovering himself piece by piece. The woman remained close, speaking softly, her voice carrying warmth and reassurance. Though his body still bore scars, his spirit felt lighter. Every note he chirped was stronger than the last, proof of resilience. Outside, the world continued as though nothing had changed, but within this small space, everything had shifted. He was no longer forgotten. He had found care, and with it, the chance to heal. As evening fell, Rio perched higher, his feathers catching the golden light of sunset. He released a whistle, stronger than before, the sound filling the room with fragile beauty. The woman closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, whispering, "You found your voice again." His song was not perfect, but it was alive, filled with resilience. The scars would remain, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they told the story of survival, of a spirit unbroken. Ryo's journey from silence to song marked not an ending, but a beginning, a promise of life renewed. The night settled softly, stars flickering above like silent witnesses. Ryo perched proudly on his stand, his feathers catching the glow of lamplight. His chest lifted as he released a whistle, clear and strong, filling the room with sound that once seemed lost forever. The woman sat nearby, hands clasped over her heart, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. She whispered, "You're home now." Ryo's gaze turned toward her, eyes reflecting trust. The scars of his past lingered, but they no longer defined him. His song was not of survival, but of triumph. A voice reborn in freedom. Morning light poured gently through the windows, painting the room in soft gold. Ryo stretched his wings wide, feathers ruffling as if reclaiming the strength once stolen. He chirped brightly, the sound echoing against the walls. The woman laughed softly, her voice tender, saying, "What a voice you've found." Each note carried hope, not just for him, but for all creatures who had ever known neglect. His song became more than survival. It became a message, a call to life, proof that even the broken could heal. The morning air seemed lighter, as if it too rejoiced in his recovery. Later that day, Ryo perched by the window, eyes scanning the world outside. The sky stretched endlessly, blue and vast, a reminder of freedom. His wings twitched as if yearning to take flight, but his gaze returned to the woman who had saved him. She stood close, whispering, "You're safe now, but the world is yours too." He tilted his head, chirping softly, as though understanding. His cage was gone, replaced by open air, warmth, and care. The past was still etched in scars, but his present sang of trust. This was not captivity, it was belonging. As dusk fell, the woman carried Ryo outside, the sky awash in orange and purple hues. The cool air brushed his feathers, and he lifted his wings, catching the fading light. She whispered, "Fly when you're ready." He hesitated, claws gripping her hand tightly, then released a clear whistle that echoed into the open sky. His wings spread wide, trembling, but steady. It was a choice not of escape, but of trust. For the first time, he stood between the world and the safety of love, knowing both were his to claim. The stars rose again, and Ryo perched high on a branch near the house, the woman watching from below with quiet pride. His silhouette framed against the night sky, wings folded in calm strength. He sang, his voice carrying across the stillness, filling the world with resilience and hope. She whispered softly, "You found your new voice." The sound lingered long after, not just in the night, but in the heart of every soul who might hear. His story was no longer of pain, it was of survival, love, and rebirth. Ryo had been broken, but now, he was whole.